Sudden shifts in tone can really pull a reader out of the situation, out of the moment, out of the brilliance of what you're trying to write, especially when the emotions are so contrary to each other. An abrupt change from humorous to serious can feel unnatural. That's why today we are going to talk about avoid abrupt tone shifts, tips for creating emotional flow. These are rules of writing. Now remember, we learned the rules so we can break the rules. Now tone is tone is the underlying emotional current of your story, shaping how readers respond to every scene and character. It acts as a filter through which your narrative unfolds, whether it's somber, lighthearted, suspenseful, or romantic. Oh, you're so pretty. Achieving a consistent tone is really your goal as a writer because you want to allow the reader to feel engulfed in the truth of the moment. So, again, if it's a funeral, not again, but for the first time, if it's a funeral scene, you can make it funny as long as the tone is funny to start. You can have funny moments in serious, dark undertones or somber moments. It's about controlling the foundational tone while being able to manipulate and adjust as needed when telling your story. So let's do that by analyzing The Great Gatsby. We're gonna take what are we gonna do? Three quick, simple passages. This is gonna be a quick video, and then we're gonna take it from there. So, so I don't know if you know, but F. Scott Fitzgerald, F. Fitz, Scott Fitzgerald, F. Scott Fitzgerald wrote The Great Gatsby. Everyone knows that. All right, passage 1, observing Gatsby's party. Now, just for the record, we're going to see an evolution of the tones and how they maintain a consistency throughout the entire novel. So, the first one is boom! In his blue gardens, men and girls came and went like moths among the whisperings and the champagne and the stars. So it is a lively description, very common in the book, but the tone remains reflective and it sets a sense of fleeting joy because Nick's description feels detached, almost as if he's observing the spectacle rather than participating in it. You know, there's a sense of melancholy, which brings us to number 2, reflecting on Gatsby's loneliness. He had come a long way to this blue lawn, and his dream must have seemed so close that he could hardly fail to grasp it. Even though the focus has shifted now from the lively party to Gatsby's internal world, the tone of quiet sadness and longing stays intact, maintaining the novel's reflective mood. Okay? It stays in moments, it ponders things, it questions stuff. And that takes us to spoiler alert. It was after we started with Gatsby toward the house that the gardener saw Wilson's body a little way off in the grass, and the Holocaust was complete. Now, although this has become much darker, the tone is still reflective and somber, and which fits the overall narrative. So, the takeaway is ultimately that whatever you write, okay, if the overall tone is serious and realistic, you can play with moments and beats. You can manipulate and play with ideas. You can make serious things have funny moments. But if, let's say, your first 3 chapters are real serious, and then the fourth chapter is just all comical pratfalls and just not everybody's just making jokes, it might not make sense. If your main character is driving the narrative, and they're reflective and they're in their heads and they see the darkness in the world, you have to remember the POV that the story is being told through should also reflect the character. And that's why it's important to maintain a consistent tone in the feeling. Because if your passages go from that character's tone and then another character's on the page and now the story is written in their tone, which can happen. That becomes head hopping in the sense of that even the scene itself is changing its mood. So if a comedical character comes in and starts making jokes left and right and they're seeing the brightness of the world, it's very jarring. Now, that doesn't mean you can't have a POV switch with a chapter, but you have to establish that character as the character's POV in that chapter. But at the same time, it's important to maintain a consistent tone through the whole novel, the whole narrative, while allowing yourself some movement and freedom to adjust. Whereas, for example, in my epic fantasy novel, it's very gritty, it's dark, it's based on trauma, it's based on death, it's based on all these serious topics. But that doesn't mean characters don't rib each other. It doesn't mean that there isn't humorous moments. What I try to avoid is jokes. I try to avoid characters making jokes, and I try to stay away from making jokes at the expense of the narrative. If it's a natural moment within characters and it's funny, that's different. But the tone still has to maintain that sort of like grittiness. At the same time, I have a sliver of hope that develops over the course of the narrative because the character has hope in their heart. They have purpose. But you have to maintain that in not only your chapters, but your characters and the overall truth of the novel. Now, I made this a very short video today, so we're going right into the final thoughts. Tone is a tool that helps you evolve your story and shape the emotional journey of your readers. It is something that allows the reader to understand what is going on emotionally before words are even said or dialogue. It's not just about consistency, but about using tone to embrace each scene's emotional depth and meaning. You want your tones to reflect the scene itself, the chapter, the character, and the overall arc of that act and the novel. Now, keep in mind, as you revise, you want to pay attention to tonality, and it could shift. What could happen is you start your novel, and in chapter 1, it's dark and gritty. And then by chapter 20, it's a little bit more light and funny. It can be. As long as you go back and make sure that from chapter 1 to chapter 20, there's a evolving tone change, a gradient that slides into that more abstract kind of humor, maybe. But if you're reading chapters and the tone is all over the place, it's one is just really sad, one is this one, you might have an issue. So you have to kind of do the work. Keep in mind, though, if you're dealing with a funeral scene, it's okay to be somber, but it's also okay to be funny. Like, it depends on what you've set the tone of the novel. You're not beholden to an emotion just because it might make sense for that. Because again, Mel Brooks. Imagine Mel Brooks wrote a book and it was about dark stuff. It would all be fun. It would have humor in it. That'd just be because it's Mel Brooks, right? That's his style. It's his theme. So you're allowed to play with what people might even associate with a tone in certain situations. But your job is to make sure that whatever it is you choose, maintain consistency or allow gradual gradient growth in those changes. Okay. Next video in the series, we're going to talk about chapter endings, ending chapters with hooks or cliffhangers to compel readers to keep turning the pages. I like it. Question. What book have you read recently where the tone really stood out to you, and how did it enhance your reading experience? Did you really feel the tone? Was it something that was invisible, but then you thought about it later? Did you when you thought about the book, were you like, oh, this book was very dark and scary? Anyway, if you like what you've seen and you haven't done so already, please subscribe and hit the bell icon so you don't miss out. Other than that, keep developing the right mindset. I'll see you next time. Bye.